Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reefs. On today's episode, we're going to get this idiot-proof reef tank full of water. Alright, so it's the episode we've been waiting for. Well, I've been waiting for anyway. I'm dying to get this idiot-proof reef tank wet and full of water because that's when the life really begins. As much fun as it is picking out equipment and dry goods and piecing together a bit of a shopping list, it's so much more fun when we get to put water in this thing and start the actual reef creation itself. So it leads us to this episode where we are now, where we've got to work out what water we put in the tank. Now obviously we're putting salt water in the tank, but if you remember back to when you first got into the hobby, it's not just such a straightforward question and answer. What salt water do you use? There's 1,000 different types on the market, and it can be a little bit intimidating for a new person getting into reefing. So I thought we'd touch on some of the different types of salts that are on the market there and just help people work their way through it.
So let's take a look at some aquaforest salts.
So aquaforests have their sea salt, reef salt, and then probiotic salt, each with a slight different twist on things, and I thought I'd briefly explain some of the options available there. The sea salt's kind of more aimed at a fish-only system. It's lacking a little bit in the alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, and some of the trace elements, because if you don't have coral in your tank, you're not going to need those elements. So it's a stripped-down version of their salt, just to keep, if you've got a predator tank or something like that going, it's a good option to get that salt, save you a few dollars on elements that you're just going to end up changing out in the water anyway. The next one up is their reef salt, which is the one that I'd probably recommend in this example, which is this artificial salt that mimics natural salt water as much as possible. It's got excellent nutrient levels. And when I say nutrient, I mean alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, and some trace elements in here. It kind of imitates natural salt water as best as possible. So it's a nice, stable way to go with your water for something like the idiot-proof reef tank. Next up, they have their probiotic salt, and this is very similar to the reef salt. It just comes loaded up with some probiotics in there, which can help tackle nitrates and phosphates in your tank. Now, it could also be useful for helping cycle a tank, but to be honest, it's an additional expense and it's an additional learning curve for a new reefer, so I'd probably, out of the aquaforest range, lean towards the reef salt. Now, that's just the aquaforest salt range. Believe it or not, there's a whole heap of other brands out there, and another one I want to touch on is one that I've used myself, is the Aquarium Systems Instant Ocean. Now, Aquarium Systems come out with a couple of different salt varieties themselves. They have the Reef Crystals, which is it's got a much higher elevated alkalinity and calcium and magnesium, things like that. It's designed to dramatically increase coral growth. Not something we're really going after with the idiot-proof reef tank. Also, if we end up using a different type of salt, the parameters could swing too far and could upset some corals, and that's a very complicated thing to explain to a newbie in the reef keeping game. So if you're looking at the Aquarium Systems range of salt, I would look at the Instant Ocean, because its parameters mimic natural salt water much closely, more so than their reef crystals. So if you're going to go an artificial salt in the Aquarium System range, that's the one I'd go. There are a bunch of other brands. One that people know really well is the Red Sea. They've got a blue bucket and a black bucket. The black bucket's the Pro. I'd recommend the blue bucket because, again, it mimics natural salt water. And you're probably noticing there's a whole heap of other brands of salt out there. I could make this video go for 8 hours if we want to talk about them all. But one thing that always comes back in common, you may notice that I keep recommending salt that mimics natural salt water as much as possible. So in this example of the idiot-proof reef tank, I'm actually going to use natural salt water, and there's a few reasons for that. The first one being, here where I live in Australia, it's really easy to get access to very high quality natural salt water. We are surrounded by it. It's not too polluted. It's easy to access. It's affordable. And it makes sense for a newbie getting into the game. Mixing up artificial salt, one, you've got to prepare an RODI system, or you've got to buy RODI. Then you've got to mix up salt, you've got to tell them to have them at the right temperature, you've got to have pumps to mix it, you've got to mix it for so long, you've got to store it, you've got to use it within a time frame. It complicates things really quickly. If you can take, or either purchase some containers from a local fish shop, or even some fish shops rent out containers, and you just get your weekly or your monthly amount of water change salt from the local store, have that on hand. There's no mixing, there's nothing else that needs to be done. You literally take water out, put water in, makes life much easier. So in this tank, I'm going to fill it up with natural salt water, but I am going to put some caveats out there. First one being, that is not applicable if you don't live in an area where you've got good access to natural salt water. Obviously, if it costs more than artificial salt water, you're probably going to lean towards artificial, or if the quality of the natural salt water is rubbish, you're going to lean towards artificial salt water because you know you're going to get quality water. For the type of corals we're looking to keep in this tank, they're going to be soft corals and basic things. We should be pretty good if there's any sort of natural swing in the natural salt water. I'm happy to take that risk. The other caveat I'd like to throw out there is I recommend everyone, and I mean everyone, I do myself, I always keep, even if it's one of these small buckets, I generally have a couple of the bigger buckets, have some artificial salt on hand. Just because it's all good and well having a drum or two of natural salt water there to do your weekly or monthly water changes. But if you have some sort of emergency with your tank and you need to do a huge water change, you either need to make sure you have enough natural salt water on hand, or at least have a couple of buckets of salt about so you can mix up a large water change and do it on the spot. You don't want to be trying to get a local fish store owner out of bed at 2 a.m. when an anemone's walked through a pump and your tank's now turned into milk. You need to be able to serve yourself at that time in need. So I recommend everyone to grab a bucket of salt, whether it be Aquaforest, Aquarium Systems, Red Sea, or any one other of about 3,000 different brands on the market. Grab yourself a bucket of artificial salt. But for this tank, we're going to use natural salt, and I've done enough time talking. Let's get some water in the tank now. All right, so here we are. We're in here in my fish room, and the water box is sitting here with its sand in there, the rock in there, and of course our lots of air, no water. So I've got up here some natural salt water that I picked up from my local fish store. They charge, I think it's $5 a drum for this, which is cheap as chips. That's 25 litres, so it's going to take 3 and maybe a touch more drums to get this water box full. I don't have a heater in there yet, but we do have the return pump that we touched on before in another episode, so we're going to be able to get water circulating in here at least. So nothing more to do really other than get the hose in the water, and you can see I'm using my very friendly cat's scratching post to help gravity feed this water in. Now, I am going to do something here that I don't recommend a lot of people do, and that's siphon some water into the tank. You do need to be careful when siphoning. You don't want to get any of the water in there. They can have natural salt water, and even artificial salt water can have bacteria in it, which is not good for the body. So if you're going to siphon, please be careful not to get any in your mouth. All right, that started the siphon, and we're off and running. I'm going to try and minimize the splash as best I can. The best way I can do that is aim the water at the rock. Let the rock diffuse it. I messed up a bit of my sand here at the front, so I'll just fix that up now while the water's not too deep. And I'll speed things up a bit so you don't have to stand there watching me fill a tank of water. You can see that we've got a little bit of dust still in the sand. It's not too bad. It's one of those things that, like I said, we could have kept rinsing that sand all day long, but at some point in time we had to concede that we'd done enough rinsing and we got as much dust as we were ever going to get off the tank, and here we are. Alright, so I've probably only put about 60 litres of water in this tank, despite it being an 80 litre tank, or approximately 80 litre tank. Obviously with the sand, the rock, the pump, the foam, some things in there just displacing the volume a little bit. It's not going to take the full 80 litres to fill it, which is cool. All we've got to do now is turn on the return pump and see how things flow, so let's give it a shot. And we're off and running. Just going to give a gentle ripple on the surface just to really let that Kessel give us that that shimmer that Kessel's famous for. And that's pretty much it, guys. We're now circulating through. You can see a little bit of algae in here out of one of my drums, which is because I didn't clean the drum out enough last time. So I've got a little bit of algae in there. I could grab a net and fish that out. I was tempted to grab it with my fingers then, but I'll let it go. Eventually it'll make its way up into the overflow here and get caught on the sock, which is exactly what we want it to do. I'll get the camera to show you how the water's now flowing through the tank, in through the overflow here, through the sock, up through our foam, over the overflow into the return pump section, and then back out into the main tank. So we've got everything there ready to go. We really need to start looking at what sort of filtration we want to put in this, and obviously heating and cooling. Cooling is probably not going to be too much of an issue because I live right down south in Australia and we're pretty cool down here. But heating, it'd be pretty ambitious to run a tank without a heater. So we need to have a look at heaters. We need to have a look at some sort of media, some sort of filtration. I appreciate your input. If you've got any feedback on that, you can pop it in the comment section down below. I realize I haven't gone over any of the comments in this video, and that's because I got this video smashed out just after doing the other videos because I was really keen to get water in this tank, and I'm sure you can understand. I'll let this run for a couple of days now and see whether I need to adjust that Sichet return pump or not, because it looks like a fair bit of flow here, although to be honest, once I point that down in there, things calm down a bit more. It's probably a nice amount of flow. It's not disrupting sand, but it is moving water through the tank. So I'll put it back up just to give us that gentle surface disruption. A couple of other things we probably need to consider as a top-off unit, and whether we want to dose, and if we do want to dose, what we should dose. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more from this series, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again, guys. Bye.